Hello, 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 hello. We are live again, and this is DEIB Small Talks with Florence Ido. So, I am your host for today, and by the way, this is sponsored by Bavard Talent Solution. We are still on the same topic, which is incorporating diversity in promotions and transfer structure. Today, I have with me amazing guests. As we can see, we have three main guests that will be speaking on today's topic, and that is Yael Winder, Michael Rocky, Chiquita Jackson. And once again, I am your host. Shortly, I will introduce our guests, but I'll just allow more time for our listeners to join us today. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So, people are beginning to chime into today's show. And I will shortly introduce our guests, our panelists. We have three speakers, like I showed earlier. I would introduce them before I give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So I have with me Michael Rockets. Michael Rocket is an industrial and organization consultant. He's also a project manager and a business analyst with the National Vision Incorporated. Michael has helped several organizations optimize their business processes and, of course, their business strategies, of which diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness is an integral part. Is a proponent of diversity, DEIB, and he also has a very fantastic background coming from a black military veteran home and, of course, a multi-racial family. Michael, can you introduce yourself shortly to our listeners?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Michael Rocky. I'm an industrial organizational psychology consultant, and a lot of my work centers around optimizing businesses by improving their people and their processes. And so, a reason that DEI and B is, something that I really advocate for is because you have to have not just the best people, but the right people in the right roles for your organization to succeed. And in order to do that, we need diverse, well-prepared teams to have the best outcomes. And, right there, without having a diverse team, it's going to be a lot harder for you or your business to be successful. And that's been my experience and what the research shows. So I'm here to advocate for that.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Michael. We really appreciate you. Thank you. So, secondly, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is Yael Winder. Yael Winder is she's a diversity, inclusion, and equity consultant with the State of Minnesota Revenue Department. I will bring her on board shortly, and let me just tell you a little bit about her. So, yeah, as a diversity DEI consultant, like I said, with the Minnesota Department of Revenue. In Minnesota Department of Revenue, she provides agency-wide program coordination to implement the agency diversity and inclusion strategies, and here also facilitates organization-wide diversity focused conversation, trainings, committees, programs, and quite a number of other activities. She also spent the last 9 years working on various HR departments, HR functions, which also includes recruiting and staffing, retention, DEI, of course, training, customer service, and employee experience engagement, and I'm not gonna miss this, performance management, employee relations, and talent management. I'll say here is an all-round HR professional. Yeah, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Florence. Yes, as Florence mentioned, I'm your winder. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Super excited to be at a part of this conversation about promoting diversity and promotion and transfers. As Florence already mentioned, I'm not going to repeat what she already stated about my bio here. I'm super passionate about cultivating equity and centering equity in the line of work that we do every day. How does that exist? How does that look like? And how do we respond to inequities or injustice or any issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we create a culture of belonging where
Mhm.
everyone feels value and they have that sense of home, of being a part of a work family ultimately. So employee experience is a big part of what I do, and I enjoy that very much. So I'm super excited to be here today. Look forward to a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you. Yeah. So I have, that is not all. I have another amazing speaker. And Chiquita she has a very wide range of experience, wealth of knowledge, not just from diversity, not just because she is a people or person of color, not just because she works with the government, but because she is involved in policies in governmental works, which is very important to today's policies making. So I'm going to introduce shortly Chiquita Jackson. Thank you very much, Chiquita. I'm going to just tell the board exactly who you are while I read your bio and you let them introduce and we'll let you introduce yourself. So Chiquita, please, if I did not pronounce the name correctly, do correct me. Thank you. You're muted, by the way.
Gotcha. Thank you, Florence.
So Chiquita is the founder and CEO of CJE Career Consulting. In CJE, she provides affordable professional development services to oh god to disenfranchised communities. Jackson, Chiquita is one of the youngest women, as we can see, to run for the Maryland House of Delegates for this past primary election. Yeah, she brings impacted voices to the forefront of critical issues discussed in Maryland State Capitol. Throughout our political experience, because she is really vast in that area, throughout our political experience, Chiquita has interned on several elected offices and officials, and yes, which includes Kansas first African American state senator, and she's also the youngest Michigan state representative. And I'm talking about the youngest state representative, and that is let me say if I can get the name correctly, Joanne Jones, and of course the U.S. Senator Ben Candin. During the time with Senator Candin, she assisted in drafting congressional floor statement for Black History Month and the centennial anniversary of women's suffrage. The quite a number. The Chiquita's biography is very very long. I had to shorten it, so I'll give her the opportunity to introduce herself to our listeners.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chiquita Jackson. As Florence mentioned, I founded a career consulting agency where, because I know how difficult it is for people of color and minorities and disenfranchised communities to find work, and not just work, decent work that can help them generate or obtain that financial security and generational wealth, which is something that I am very passionate about, coming from poverty and being a first generation high school graduate, college graduate, first generation entrepreneur. So passing down and creating opportunities for our communities and installing generational wealth, tax, and resources is something that I am very passionate about and excited to talk about here today with you all.
Thank you very much for joining us, Chiquita. Okay, guys, thank you. We are going to go straight into the show today. And but before we start, we are streaming live on YouTube, we're streaming live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and of course on Twitter. Do follow us on every platform you're watching live from. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and anytime we have new videos or new programs, you will be the first to be notified. Thank you for joining us today. and welcome once again. Okay, guys. So I am still your host for today, Florence Ido. I am a DEI consultant and, of course, a talent acquisition consultant. I am contracting and consulting with organizations based on their needs. Talent Solution, which is the sponsor of today's program, is also a recruiting and training agency where we offer personalized and customized strategies to organizations to fulfill their DEI policies and, of course, implement their practices. Today, we'll be talking about an amazing topic. This is a follow up of our previous section, which was on promoting diversity in promotion and transfer structure. Today, this is the second series. We'll be talking about the same topic, but with different speakers. Last week, we had Kwabana, we had Daniel Jackson, Daniel Stephenson. Now I'm mistaken Jackson. We have Daniel Stephenson, and we also add Larissa Wells. But today we'll be having different set of speakers, ranging from your Wyndham to Michael Rocky, and of course Chiquita Jackson. It's going to be an amazing section, and trust me, I see you joining with us till the end. Thank you. Okay, so now I bring the speakers on board, and we're going to talk about this amazing questions topic we have in front of us. So this is how it's going to go: is I'll ask a question, I will try to direct the question to you guys, but you can always take the flow as soon as if you have an answer. But we'll try and make it as orderly as possible. But one thing I need to bring is because listeners. We have listeners on the other end. We can see some people already commenting. Our last speaker just said hi to the family. Everyone, can you say hi to Kovana? It was our last speaker, Kovana. We say hi to you. I do appreciate the last series. It was amazing. But trust me, this is going to be another impactful and insightful moment where we discuss this topic. So over the years, I have some questions written down. Over the years, organization have been talking about diversity policies. Let me reduce this a little bit. Diversity policies and practices. Ever since the death of George Floyd, diversity has been a major issue in every organization, ranging from we begin to hear things like bringing those diverse candidates. We heard things like increase the number of diversity we have in the pool. I'm a talent acquisition consultant. I get that all the time. Like, we want to hire for this role. Make sure we have this number of diversity. Make sure we have this people of color, this Latinos. Just bring them in. Let's get. But one thing is that I've always said is it's not just about the people of color. It's about also retaining these people of color because you won't be qualified if you won't apply for a role you're not qualified for, and you won't be employed for a role you're not qualified for. So when we have these people of color in the organization, what practices, what has the organization put in place to retain these diverse employees, no longer candidates, now employees. So that is one topic we're going to discuss today. The topic of today's show is, of course, incorporating or promoting diversity in promotion and transfer structure. So that will be our first question. How can organization incorporate or promote diversity or DEIB in full in their promotion and transfer structures? I will hand over the mic to from my top right actually, Michael Rocky. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so one thing that businesses can really do to help promote diversity in the organization is, first take a look at, who are your senior leaders? What does that make up of the organization? Do you have the opportunity for someone in a lower level position to say, hey, I can see someone that looks like me, thinks like me in one of these higher level roles? And if not, we need to start there and figure out if we need to bring someone in from external from the company that has the qualifications to sit in that role. But people need to be inspired and be able to see, hey, I can really do this role. There's someone that looks like me that has gone before me, kind of paved a path to be in this position. I can do it as well. And in addition to that, the senior leaders that are in place, we need to set up mentorship programs, development opportunities where they're working with diverse internal employees to let them know, hey, we see you, we're familiar with you, because, you know, in a perfect world, it would always be the best person gets promoted to the right job. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, so a lot of times it's the person that management or senior leaders are most familiar with gets promoted to that job. So we need to improve the opportunities for leaders and organizations to become familiar with their diverse talent in the organization. And then that way they can provide them a path to, you know, be promoted throughout the company as well.
That's an amazing one out there. So we're talking about mentorship, not just about having someone you're familiarized with. Yeah, what do you think about that?
You know what? Michael just took the words out of my mouth. So I couldn't echo even more about what Michael have already stated. I think representation matters. I think that being a woman of color going into the workforce, if I don't see people who look like me that are in those leadership role, I do question, like, hey, would I even have those opportunities? Who are sitting in those roles? If they're predominantly white, then you already recognize that there's already an issue there. I would say start off with the reality check, what I like to call it, right? Look at your data, look at who's representing, look at who are the BIPOC leadership that are advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I say BIPOC, I mean Black, Indigenous, people of color. You know, who are our allies, right? Even if though we do have roles that are predominantly white, do we have anyone advocating for BIPOC leadership, BIPOC advancement, BIPOC recruitment? So it really starts off with leadership taking that commitment and actually not only talking it, but walking the talk. So that can be a variety of things, as Michael already mentioned, a mentorship program. Where's the access? Is that accessible for everyone? Or are we just picking and choosing who looks like me, who talk like me, or who act like me to these mentorship programs and advancing them that way? And secondly, we also have to really look at when we're doing that reality check, and if we are underutilized in our BIPOC representation, then own it, right? Hold yourself accountable. Be transparent with your employees that we acknowledge that we have low representation in BIPOC leadership. Here are some action and steps that we're going to take to ensure an inclusive and a place of belonging for everyone, where representation is a top priority. So people do, at the end of the day, feel welcome. I think other things such as employee resource groups, ERGs, the more you have of those groups, the better you can get more referrals, more advocacy, more allies with each other. Because sometimes when people think about a leadership promotional opportunity, who are you thinking? First of all, who's the first person that comes to mind? Is it a white employee that you have happy hours with, or you meet on a daily basis with, or is your favorite person, or a family member? There's nepotism, there's favoritism that exists in the workforce. So really identifying those biases and really having those reality checks, like, you know what, we do have an issue here. Here are the next steps that we're going to take, whether if it's ERGs, mentorships, being intentional with our recruitment in those promotional opportunity goes a long way. We need to stop talking about it. We need to actually do it.
Well, thank you very much for that. Chiquita, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I emphasize and retweet what my two colleagues said earlier. It's just really important to check those biases. I know, for instance, as a person who have had experiences, introducing or integrating the mentorship program into a space is ideal. It would be great, but also I have noticed, and what I have realized is that, I see a lot of white supervisors or white employers saying that they want this, saying that they're wanting to do this, but aren't really doing anything to do it. I had a mentor, and my mentor was around my age, but a little bit older, a white man, and he criticized my writing techniques, telling me that he questioned me and even asked if I graduated or if I was a graduate from college. And I had to report that to my supervisor because it was confusing to me. A person that I thought that could help me grow was just questioning me, questioning my abilities instead of trying to, empower me to be in this space. And understanding that when black and brown people are in those spaces, we get into a position, get a position. Oftentimes we're not even looked at for like we're not looked at for promotions because we just started, or they don't feel like we have the strengths and skills that do what it takes. Whereas if I get hired the same day as a white woman, 9 times out of 10, and I have seen this, that white woman will get promoted quicker than I have. So it's like I have noticed. I've also noticed that employers say that they're looking for a diversity and equity and inclusion manager, supervisor, specialist, and most of the time those positions are going towards white people. So if we're saying that we're wanting to have that diversity and inclusion, let's talk about the ready part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is that racial diversity, equity, and inclusion versus just diversity and inclusion. Because I feel like diversity and inclusion has been taken away from the BIPOC communities and been given to white people who have that's considered low income but still has privileges. So I think it's really important for us to just really be intentional about the employer practices that we're having, and being direct with recruiters and what you're looking for. Because I go in, I'm looking at nothing at 60,000 less. However, I would get lowballed by a manager or by the recruiter because they don't want me to make that much money. So it's so many things that go along into the hiring practices, and what I have heard from our clients telling me that's going through the interview process, going through that job search, where they're submitting out their applications, not even getting picked, even though they have a master's degree, everything that qualifies, but still aren't even being considered for an interview.
Hmm.
It's a lot of things that I have noticed and I have seen, and it frustrates me when I see employers just doing the bare minimum to create that culture, that work culture that is inclusive and shows that diversity, equity, and racial equity and inclusion throughout all of the platforms. So
Okay.
that's my take on it.
Thank you very much for that. That is really, really very deep and detailed. Now that I see that every one of us we've been talking about biases, which is something that's very, very critical when we're talking about diversity or DEIB. And biases, I know most speakers or trainers have always talked about biases when they're talking about biases in recruitment, biases and interview biases, but only few have talked about biases in promotion standards, biases and determining who is the next candidate to be promoted or who should move further the ladder. I believe that is this conversation will be leading to today, which is very amazing. I was going to introduce it maybe towards the middle, but it's good to be starting from that. So now let's decide biases in promotion structures. Managers, like Chiquita said, is mostly always going to be a white male, or maybe sometimes, or few occasions, maybe a white female. And we want to be represented on the table. We want a seat to that table. Diverse candidates or diverse employee, people of color, underrepresented, they also have a voice that should have an impact wherever they are. So now, how can organization, at least everyone has biases. I have my own bias that I'm working on. I can take that away, but I'm conscious of it. I'm aware of where my biases lay. If I start talking with someone and they start mentioning certain things, it could want to trigger my own biases. But I do like this, and oh no, Florence, you have to be very neutral. So I am aware of my biases, but how many managers, how many supervisors, how many leaders, people in the leadership position are actually aware of their own biases to make certain stance or correction where they should, to pull themselves back where they should? That is the question that we have. So now, what do you think? What are the advice that we can give to this leadership, to these people in the leadership position, people that already have a seat at the table What advice, what tips can we give to them when we're talking about biases in promotion structures? I would start from yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would say my biggest suggestion around that is being uncomfortable. Being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Sometimes with biases, most of the times we don't recognize them. As you mentioned, Florence, I have my own biases that I need to be aware of. I have a group of friends, coworkers that call me out on these biases.
Mhm.
So I think eventually in a workspace where you have folks or peers or colleagues or even your supervisor who are able to call it in on your biases. So having that conversation and pointing it out in a professional and appropriate way, of course. You don't want to be negative and respond to somebody for having these biases because most of the time they're unconscious. We don't recognize them, but we just say it because it's just naturally coming up. Just like how when we use the when we say you guys, right, it's not gender neutral. It just automatically comes off so many times more than we would like it to come off. But sometimes I think that if you have allies in your workplace, if you have a positive work environment where you are able to call out those biases, especially from a leader standpoint, I think for one, you need to educate yourself because as a leader, you have to lead by example, right? You have to let your employees know what diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging means to you, how much of an advocate and ally you are, because you are modeling that out. And even showing humility, saying that I have my own biases. I welcome people to really call my biases out because sometimes I don't recognize them because it's embedded in me and I'm trying to change that. So if you care about me, if you care about my professional development, if you care about me as your leader, I welcome everyone to call me out on these biases because sometimes they're unseen and I need that continuous development even as a leader. I think that staying humble and showing humility comes a long way. And I think that sometimes some leaders, not all leaders, because I've seen a lot of great leaders that are now my mentors, um, that are power driven. So I think that when you are in a position of power and privilege, I think that showing humbleness and humility to your employees to allow them to give you that feedback or constructive criticism, I think that you will develop. And then eventually uh, that will be kind of contagious, right? So when people start to see that culture shift, like, oh, I'm not going to be retaliated against, or I'm not going to be fear in sharing that, you know what, did you recognize that, you're a bit biased in the hiring of the two candidates because of that BIPOC candidate over the non-BIPOC person. Sharing, having those open and honest, uncomfortable conversation is something that is well needed, but it's still hard to have. So I would pause it there to kind of share my perspective around that.
Okay, before I give the mic to Michael to give his own standpoint on what he thinks about how we can eliminate those biases, we have one very important message from one of our listeners which I wanted to highlight, and that is cultural difference, cultural languages differences. Now, talking from the standards of white male Americans, are seen as less elevated as opposed to different dialects. This is deep because I've come across certain situations where people tell me your accent is too strong, and I was like, I'm speaking English, but what does my accent got to do with what I have to offer? As what does my accent, for instance, or the way I speak, or my choice of languages, what has it got to do with the value I am going to bring to the table? That is another bias, another strong bias, usually coming from the standard white male. Okay, I would let's have your take on ways that we can resolve or we can eliminate biases in promotion structures.
Yeah, I want to echo a little bit of what yours said and then also add to that as well that yes, individuals have their own biases which need to be addressed and they need to be made aware of, but there's also biases within the system itself. Something as simple as using a natural language processor to analyze resumes and things along those lines. What we've found is if it is, a typical white male that is doing the programming for that natural language processor to run, it is more likely to pull out white male candidate resumes than any other resumes from that, from the pool. And so in that situation, we have to be aware that not only do individuals and their biases play a role in the system itself will have and take on the biases of the people that make it up. And so, making people aware of those biases up front is a great step. But the biggest thing is you have to instill in your team and in your people a growth mindset. Because if you tell someone who's rooted in their ways, hey, that was bias, or, your bias is showing, however you phrase it to them, if they're not willing to grow and learn from that, their first instinct is typically either going to be to deny that or to get defensive. Well, as soon as someone starts to deny or get defensive, you're fighting a losing battle. They're just going to dig their heels in and not want to change. You have to come at them from a place of, empathy and understanding, hey, your biases are formed by the way you grew up, the situations you were in, whether you were exposed to diversity or at a young age or not. There's a lot of things that play into that. And while the outcomes of biases are bad in and of themselves, if you go to someone and say, hey, you're biased, that's bad. It is, but if you frame it in that context, people are going to shut down. Whereas if you come to somebody and say, hey, in my opinion, or based on my perspective, the outcome of this situation seems like it was skewed by, your bias or your experience, whatever it may be. Can we sit down, evaluate this, and find a way to grow, move forward so that, this is a learning opportunity, not a shaming opportunity. And that's one of the biggest things is people need to have that growth mindset. And every opportunity is an opportunity for them to learn and get better and realize, okay, hey, maybe I have been doing this wrong for a long time or for my whole life, whatever the situation may be, but that doesn't mean I have to keep doing it wrong. I can grow, I can change, and I can use my experience in the past of making decisions based off my bias as opposed to the facts and the data that's in front of me and realize, okay, it's an opportunity for me to grow, and then I can help people that used to think or that still think the way that I used to think. And then from there, that one person growing and changing can affect the others around them and help bring everyone forward from making decisions out of a place of bias to making a decision out of a place where, they're letting the data and the evidence drive the decision-making process as opposed to their own bias, their own experience, and their perception.
Thank you very much, Michael. There's one thing you said I would like to highlight, which is the growth mindset. It's very important for us to realize what our biases are. We talk about unconscious biases, but the moment they become conscious biases, which means you realize what your biases are, you're taking a step to acceptance of cultural differences, of people of color, of professional differences, thought differences, different perspective to things, different take to things. And at that time, when you get to that point of acceptance, you get to the point where you can embrace all. You embrace all. And at that time, that is the goal of every organization. When you talk about policies, that's the goal. Let's get to the goal where we not just recognize the goal, we accept and embrace. But how many organizations have actually gotten there? That's the question. How many organizations have gotten to that point where they did not just awareness, but now we're talking about acceptance and embrace. Before I gave Chiquita the mic to talk about our own view on this, I just want to welcome and thank those who have joined us, our listeners that have joined us so far. Thank you very much, those who have been joining us from LinkedIn and also from YouTube. And like I said, we're streaming live. You can also share with your own connections, share with more people so they can join us on to the series. This series is recorded and it can be replayed for those that couldn't join us live. So you can always go back to watch it, and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn and I can send a recording of the series. There is a commendation for Michael, which I will just highlight. But while I like that, I'll give Chiquita the mic. So, Chiquita, what do you think? How can organization eliminate biases or at least diminish it? in their processes, in their transfers and promotion process?
I
Yeah.
would.
So,
Oh,
oh,
sorry.
my bad. Go ahead, Chiquita. Sorry.
No worries. I definitely would say channeling or understanding or checking your microaggressions, because what I have noticed in a hiring space as a recruiter or helping employers find, and applicants or things of that nature, is that going through the interview process, I have seen that they are more likely to be understanding towards white applicants than they are towards people of color. One instance where I had worked with a client and his resume had some discrepancies on the LinkedIn, where LinkedIn, you possibly just didn't update it. So it's understandable. However, they literally tried to use that as the bias on should he even be considered for the position. It was a manager position. He was a black guy, but when we had conversations or interviewed, white people or white applicants, that was never an issue. So just understanding that microaggressions do exist. No matter how diverse or open-minded a person can be or say they are, they still have those microaggressions in regards against, the difference between people from different backgrounds versus their own. Um, Having that understanding in regards to you have microaggressions and checking those and understanding if you sometimes you the person, a supervisor for like other role or other company, may not be the right person to be in the interview sometimes because of they have those microaggressions, and allowing their colleagues or people that work with them that have an open mindset, is more open to understanding people from all backgrounds, should be in those interview groups versus that person that's just a little closed-minded. So I feel like having those open-minded interview groups and really, really, really being intentional with your selection or with your reasons for pushback in regards to an applicant, versus just saying, well, it seems like this person won't be qualified because of these discrepancies that I'm seeing on LinkedIn and resume, where I don't feel like LinkedIn should be held as a statement or a platform for the hiring process if that's not what the applicant submitted for the application. So that has been something that I have noticed. I've noticed that microaggressions still exist, and gaslighting is really really, really has been a part of the process too. And it makes people from minority communities uncomfortable, especially if we're going in there with the mindset that I'm equipped for this position. I have ultimate amount of years of experience. However, I'm looked at because I don't have a college degree, but I have the years amount of experience. Y'all won't consider me. So it's a lot of pushback that a lot of Black and brown people or job seekers get from the employer side because of those discrepancies that I've been talking about. So yeah, I can go on and on, y'all. Stop.
Yeah, I do know that. If you have anything to say, please you can go on before I go to the next topic. Okay, I
Yeah,
do
I just
highlight
wanted to.
something. Yes, please go
Oh,
on, Michael. Because
okay.
for
Yeah, I was going to say I wanted to address that comment real quick. Yeah, so one thing that they have at least tried to do with tests for college admission and things along those lines is the people that are creating the test tend to, I'll say, leak bias into the test. There have been plenty of studies, a lot of research done that shows the people that are most similar to those that create the test tend to do the best on those tests. So what a lot of colleges and a lot of other standardized tests have started to do is recruit diverse teams to create these tests. So it's not just catered to one specific subgroup of people. That way it is more broad in its reach and its application. And I think the same thing could and should be done with processes, in terms of hiring and promotion, anything that is automated or systematic. If you have a more diverse group creating that process or running that process, there's going to be more eyes and more opportunities to see, hey, the outcomes of these are biased and unfair. We need to figure out a way to adjust this process to ensure it's more equitable and ensure that it's not leaving people out wrongfully or promoting people forward wrongfully. And so having a diverse group of people that create, administer, and run these processes, like an interview process, like performance reviews, the more diverse and competent people you can have on that team means the less chance there is for any one person's bias or any one point of systematic bias to cause problems and create, unequitable, unfair outcomes. So just it's kind of a self-perpetuating problem. If you don't have a diverse team create the tool or the process, the system, it's most likely not going to pull in a diverse group of people. But you have to start somewhere, and that is, getting diverse people in that creator's seat for these processes and allowing them to, check the bias in the system there. And then that way, once the system itself has a significant, less amount of bias or significantly less amount of bias, you can start to see greater diversity, pulled up through the system, recruited, promoted through the system, which then allows more opportunity for more people to come in and check the systematic bias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that submission. There's something that one of our listeners posted. Actually, it's also Kobana. And I wanted to highlight when it was talking about not that. When he was talking about ally, so many leadership, so many people we have known people of color, they've always talked about being an ally. Oh, I'm an ally, I embrace diversity, I do this, I do that. We've had quite a number of things. But what can we actually define as being an ally? I know not the normal definition that we all talk about as being in support of this group or being in support of this group. But now in an organization, I would say my submission would have been is organization need to move away from the standpoint of just being only an ally, but also to be to an implementer and executor of policies that will favor those people that they are in supporting. Do you have anything to say about that? I'll go to Chiquita.
Can you state the question one more time,
Yeah,
Florence?
my question is when we're talking about allyship, organizations have always talked about being allied to this underrepresented group. We've talked about cultural shift, cultural shock. We've talked about cultural languages differences in this series. But now let's just dive a little into the allyship. Because my submission would have been organization need to move away from just being an ally. I'm not saying they shouldn't be an ally. They need to be an ally. But just being an ally to an implementer or an executor of these policies that would favor those they are in ally with. What can they do? What advice can we give in regards to this?
I would just say stop talking about it and do it. I get so frustrated when I hear employers talk about some, oh well, I want to hire, black and brown people, but there's not enough applicants. We saw back in 2020 though, where the CEO of Wells Fargo said that he
Um,
didn't feel like black and applicants were qualified for the positions. And then and now we're constantly going through that battle where, black and brown people aren't getting selected for positions. We have to go through so many hurdles. You got to go through the initial interview, got to go through writing tests, you got to go all through sometimes another interview or a second or third or fourth interview just to even be considered to complete it. Then don't even get selected. I feel like if you truly want to be an ally, just stop talking and do it. Really show the community how you're making an effort to diversify your workforce. How are you diversifying your workforce? Are you being more open to people, because a lot of black and brown people aren't comfortable working in office spaces anymore? Are you guys going to make the accommodation or be more flexible with offering a flexible work schedule, or you're just going to eliminate those people who have the qualifications, who want to work just because of those types of things? I'm just really getting tired of employers saying that they're going to do something and never do it. It's similar to Congress. We constantly see, oh, the Bill Back. I don't know if y'all
mhm.
are in politics, but you see the Build Back Better bill. That's never it hasn't gotten passed yet, and it's been on the floor for almost over a year. I am tired of talking about diversity, equity, inclusion without talking about being paid adequately. A lot of times, a lot of people from this community, we are now knowing our worth and we're asking for that. We're making salary negotiations, and because of those things, we're not getting selected. We're not getting, the opportunity that we deserve because of us knowing our worth. I have seen a lot of backlash in regards to, employers, recruiters feeling like, the strong applicants that's requesting that aren't often getting selected for interviews or accepted for the position. It's just so many things that goes along with this allyship that we say that's important. It's extremely important. However, what are employers doing to make sure that they're meeting us halfway and it's not just one sided? Like, we can submit applications, we can have clients submit applications all day, but if we don't have the employers, like, being intentional with what they're doing, and if they know that they're only selecting white applicants for interviews, then they need to start checking that microaggression, checking that bias, and really starting to branch out a little bit more. Whether that's hiring a Black-led consulting agency, whether that's investing into, people, companies like me, CJE Consulting, where we post and share jobs in the area or in the community with our community members, whether that's via social media, our newsletter, or even our website. Really connecting with people that's trying to create or generate opportunities for those communities through professional development, career consulting, whatever the case may be. And not don't realizing you don't have to do it alone. If you're an employer, if you're a company that's struggling with trying to, retain minority employment, or trying to retain or get or increase your minority application rates, reach out for partnerships. We're here to help. I don't know how many times I have offered my services to employers just for them to say, oh, we'll consider it, but never reached out to me, and then still having the same issues that they're having today with lack of minorities that's wanting to work in their field. If they don't see no Black person on the leadership board, nine times out of 10, they're not going to apply, because they already know the work environment is going to be a one-sided versus a diverse and inclusion environment that we're seeking. So I truly say, if you're intentional about it, connect with a partner, connect with a Black-led or minority-led consulting agency that can help you get the results, help you tailor your messaging, your applications to the audience that you're wanting to do. And once we get those applicants to you, be intentional that you're going to do the right thing to make sure that your hiring practices is equitable and fair. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you very much. I actually wanted to give an applause for that. To buttress what you said, I would like to say this in a simple terms. Which you've said is consider and use diverse suppliers. It wouldn't hurt. Just consider and use diverse suppliers. It will help in implementing your policies. It will help in easing things. Even I like to use this word, onboarding you, because it's going to reduce so many pressure from you. And if somebody comes and say, oh, you're not diverse, you can say, yes, I use a diverse supplier, and get away with it anyways. But what I'm trying to say is this is something that will help, and Chiquita has really emphasized on that. I'm going to throw this question to, yeah, I'll show it on the board. So this question is for you. So how do we ensure our culture? Now we're talking about this diverse culture. Now I want to talk about the American corporate culture, like corporate culture in American, for instance, or in other continents, organization culture. So now, how do we ensure our organization culture proves inclusive enough to make people stay?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that at the end of the day, regardless to the identities that an individual holds, at the end of the day, working, we want that sense of belonging, right? We want to be validated. We want to be at a place where we do, at the end of the day, feel like we're at home, because we dedicate so much work, sometimes time in work, more than at our own personal lives. And so I think that by ensuring that our culture proves is inclusive enough to make people stay, is that we really need to take that self-assessment. Who are the diverse employees? Whose voices matter? What holidays are we celebrating besides the dominant religion celebration? um, are we accommodating enough for folks to be themselves, to be able to pray 9 to 10 times a day, to be able to fast during Ramadan without folks providing, like as Chiquita had mentioned, microaggressions or not accommodating to those religious beliefs? I think, and then on top of those, like in my personal opinion, simple changes like having non-binary bathrooms. Do we have an all-inclusive bathroom for folks to feel inclusive? To feel, do we offer that space for um, breastfeeding mothers out there to be comfortable to uh, to take time away? Or do we still feel guilty? Do we feel bad that we missed a meeting or we're coming late to a meeting? I think until we build a culture where we aren't ridiculed or retaliated or judged or having tons of microaggressions or biases, we will be able to make people stay. Because at the end of the day, like they say in a lot of articles, is that people don't leave. People leave because of either their superior leadership or management, right? I think more now than ever, since the murder of George Floyd, being in a telecommuting environment, changing culture has been a struggle for a lot of people, and not embracing differences. Embracing differences, it has not been a priority in a lot of organization, and that I think that's the downfall, because it you know why? Because it costs a lot of money, it's a lot of work, it requires a lot of diverse perspectives, and it's not cheap, right? And being lowballed and not being equitable. So a lot of things, when I think about that in combination to the previous question about being an ally too, is ensuring that our policies are up to date. Who's writing the policy? Who are the decision makers? What kind of equity lens framework or assessment or anti-racism tool do we have in place so that we can eliminate those barriers, and so that we are creating a culture of inclusivity and belonging? I think that the last 2 years, over 2 years during the pandemic, it created a lot of microaggression and exclusive work environments for people. People felt like they didn't belong anymore. We lost connection in the community, outreach and being involved to other with each other. I think that had really hurt a lot of the culture that we have in place. And now we have to shift our culture in a way where now we're in a telecommuting environment. How do we make people stay? How do we create it enough? I think there are simple things where simple things like I've already mentioned, like accommodating religious celebration, accommodating bathrooms, using gender neutral inclusive language in documents, in handbooks, in contracts, in our verbal conversation every day, inviting everyone at the table, asking, not leaving anyone out. I think that those are the type of behaviors that needs to really start right away, and really owning up to practicing those inclusive practices within the organization in order to make people want to stay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because of the time, I want to make sure we stick to time today. We are gonna give 15 minutes extra for questions that may come from the public, from our listeners. But I have a question directed to this is a private question for you, Michael. Let's let me type and show. Okay, so this question is for Michael. How can organization bridge the cultural gap? We've talked about cultural gaps now. So now how can organization bridge this cultural gap and encourage their employees to ask for internal redeployments or promotions?
Yeah, so I guess there's two ways that I look at this. And in terms of bridging cultural gaps, I think one thing that organizations need to do is kind of lay out the non-negotiables. You know, what behaviors are we not going to tolerate in the workplace? Whether that is microaggressions, things along those lines. A lot of companies already have, I'll call them the generic, anti-racist statements. Any overt racist language is not acceptable. That's a good start, but nowhere near far enough if you're trying to have an inclusive and accepting environment where people truly feel like they can belong. You have to set the non-negotiables from the top down. Here are the things that you may not think are bad at face value, but when perpetuated by, the majority of the organization, they become problematic for those people who are underrepresented. Lay out those non-negotiables so people can clearly see, okay, hey, the things that we used to be doing or that some people did are not acceptable, and here's why. Here's how this affects, offends, transgresses against the underrepresented groups in this organization. And then once people are all kind of on the same page of here's how we are going to act in this professional environment, it's a little bit easier to start trying to bridge those cultural gaps because everyone knows, where's the line too far? What questions are okay for me to ask and in what manner versus, if I ask a question in a certain way, does it come off sounding racist? Does it come off sounding condescending? Kind of to your point earlier when you were talking about your accent, there's one way to, ask about an accent that is truly appreciating the diversity, your background, your experience, and, letting someone know, hey, I really love your accent. Where are you from? Where is your family from? Versus just straight up saying, oh, I can't understand you because of your accent. It's very different ways to address, the same facet about a person, but the context around it and the way that you say it means or makes that, question, that statement mean very different things. And so once people understand, hey, we've got to treat everyone like a human being and we're all on the same playing field with the same rules, you can kind of move back and forth and bridge those cultural gaps. In terms of talent redeployment, I think it needs to be made, kind of as a pool. If you are feeling underutilized in your role or you have gone out and learned new talents that allow you to do more than what you're currently doing, it should be very easy for you to go into your company's internal database of jobs and whatever it is and say, okay, hey, I might be in sales right now, but I took an IT course and, we don't have anybody that's diverse in IT. Okay, that's something that I enjoy doing now. I should be able to apply for that IT role and let them know, hey, here are the transferable skills that I have from sales that will transfer into IT. And then here are the new skills that I've gone out and learned above and beyond what I needed for my current role in order to make sure I can be successful in this new role, whether it is, in IT, in sales, customer service, wherever they're trying to move across the organization. As long as you can prove you have the skills or you have the certifications, whatever it may be, it should be very easy for you to, sign up, apply for that internal transfer, or sign up for a pool of people that have extra skills who are being underutilized, saying, hey, if there's any projects that we as a company need to get done that require my skills of X, Y, and Z, reach out and allow me to help out with that. And then if you can work through that project or that process is successful, set yourself up for success by, going to that new role or whatever it may be. But there are, I guess, a lot of things that need to occur for companies to be prepared for that to be a seamless transition. Again, in a perfect world, anyone with the right skills that's a good fit for the role should be able to apply and be equally considered for a role that they're qualified for. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. And I feel like a lot of the things we've discussed up to this point have to occur before that talent redistribution can be, quick, seamless, and, equitable all the way around.
Thank you very much for that submission, Michael. I just want to quickly let our listeners know that we last year due to connections issues. She should be back before the end of the show. She's here, but she's just trying to get what's going on with her internet for now. Okay, thank you very much for that submission, Michael. One of our listeners, Cabana, said that the AI is also a challenging it's also challenging personal culture and norms, which is hard and can be psychologically damaging. This is very true. So he advised that DEI programs should be sure to create and encourage space for mental health as well. I think maybe we'll have to look into the topic DEI and mental health and see what we can bring into and encourage organizations to also look into the mental health of their candidates, of their employees. Very, very important. Mental health is very important because if they do not check in their mental health, they begin to receive that, oh, burnout. Burnout. You just begin to hear burnout. I need to resign. Why? Burnout and burning out. And mental health is very critical, very critical. It cannot be overemphasized. I have a question for Chiquita. Like I said, we can send in our questions, but if we don't, I would just. This is the last question I have, which was a private question. So I would just show this and we can look forward to the next series. So for the question for Chiquita, let me just show this on the screen. Okay, let's see. So question for Chiquita. What are the effective retention measures to engage and retain underrepresented employees? So particularly underrepresented employees.
I would say the first the first thing that is definitely effective is personalized prescription, I guess you could say, um, one-on-one meetings. So coming into the check-ins with the super with your employee from a minority or disenfranchised background, being intentional that you are helping them understand the work that needs to be done. Oftentimes during check-ins with supervisors, you'll get thrown tasks. The supervisor throw you tasks. However, you'll leave the meeting confused as heck because the supervisor didn't break it down to understand what you need to be successful. So if that means going through the projects step by step and helping you understand during that one-on-one, that can help a person feel more confident in their ability versus feeling like they don't have what it takes to make it. Oftentimes, our interactions with our supervisors is very important. If our supervisor is coming to us making us feel less important or less worthy, why would I feel motivated to stay here? Also, looking into as I mentioned before, and as we talked about mental health, like if I need accommodations for my mental health, or if I need accommodations with my cultural religion back practices, are you guys willing to do that, or are you guys just going to tell me, well, if it doesn't fit within, if I have a meet, say for instance, perfect example, if I have a meeting during a time where I'm supposed to pray and I can't make that meeting, are you going to accommodate me for that, or if are you going to make me feel bad for missing that meeting when you know about my pray schedule? It's those types of things that employers and supervisors can do to help to, just check your microaggressions, check your microaggressions at the door, your biases at the door, and really come into those one-on-ones intentionally ready to support and support your employees, support the person that you hired on your team, especially Black and brown people. We need those supports. Every person isn't the same, and understanding that your leadership and your management style needs to adjust or be flexible to accommodate all of those personalities, those cultural backgrounds that's in your space, and being open and receptive to applying the feedback that's given to you from your employees and integrate that into your leadership style. So if an employee is telling you that they would appreciate if you help them understand what this means during their check-in, and you don't make that time or create that space for them to do that, how are you helping them? How are you supporting them? You're pushing them out the door, to be exact. You're not encouraging them to stay. You're pushing them out the door because they don't feel appreciated and valued. So ensuring that your employees have the space to come to you, ensuring that you're being intentional and personalizing the one-on-one space that you guys have, can take that confidence of that employee and want them to stay and want them to continue to see themselves go up the ladder if they have that support from their that manager or their supervisor. That is the one of the most effective ways that I have seen, and what I have noticed when it comes to dealing with retaining members. Because oftentimes employees, they quitters, specifically Black and brown people, we quit if we feel like like our employer is being prejudiced towards us. If we eliminate all of those and we feel like we have a space for us to make mistakes, we're we're not going to be perfect every time. We're comfortable with making the mistakes, and allowing our manager is instilling us with the ability and confidence that we need to grow. That shows for retention. So I would say just really be intentional on how you interact with your employees during the one-on-one sessions that you guys have, and make sure that you're taking the feedback that they give you and applying that to your leadership, because you shouldn't, if you're not growing in your leadership, then something's wrong. If you're not growing in the way that you're managing your team, something is wrong. You should always want to be innovative and inclusive as a manager, as a supervisor, as we move forward from being, prejudiced or having those segregation, Jim Crow mindsets that, people in the past have had, and being more open, inclusive, and ready to make changes and ready to take lead to make sure that everyone feels included.
Thank you very much, Chiquita. Thank you very much. Okay, before I say that we're beginning to have some questions come in, more questions come in actually, to the public. And I just want to say this to the public is that DEI is a very critical topic, sensitive topic, talking about the diversity, talking about the diverse group, underrepresented. Maybe not as sensitive as it looks in as much you're in the right direction, but just not talking about the issue sometimes is the issue. And organization needs to do better. It's not just about creating policies. What have you put in place to execute those policies that you have created? What strategies? Most organization, I need to ask those questions. This I must direct this to leadership. Do you go back to your diversity strategies? How often do you go back to your diversity policies? How often do you update your plan of actions? Those are questions, food for thought. Questions to ask yourself, maybe rhetorical, not directed to my speakers, rhetorical for organizations to sit back and think, what do you do to implement to make sure that these people you have, they are working for you, they're working for the betterment of the organization, are healthy, not just money wise, not just the monetary aspect, but one of our listeners mentioned mental health. They're healthy in their mental health. They're healthy communication. Yes, there could be competition in an organization, but is the competition rivalry? Is it healthy? Is the rivalry healthy? So those are the conversations and those are the things the organization leadership need to think about, need to need to work towards so that they do not lose this qualified, diverse employees. We have another series coming in next 2 weeks. Like I said during our first series, that this is going to be every other Monday topic. It's going to be an every other Monday live series. We'll have another topic coming in next 2 weeks, next to Monday. Remember, this is sponsored by Bava Talent Solutions, and Bava Talent Solution is an employment and training agency. We look into diversity, very important. We also provide diverse candidates to organizations, those top professionals, those what's this called, those departments, those team that you said is white dominated, trust me, we would help you find those mix of colors. So if you need diverse candidates, please, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can always reach out to even any of our speakers. Like Chiquita said, she is a career consultant, so she does it. And you can also reach out to her if you have issues with how to work your teams out. She can put you through in that. Michael is a business analyst, is also a psychologist. You can ask one or two questions that you do not want to throw on the shows. You can go to him on LinkedIn. I would make sure that I have that broadcasted in my LinkedIn in the Bava Talent Solutions page, a company page. You can connect to them on LinkedIn. You can connect with them on LinkedIn. Ask questions, maybe deeper questions that you do not want to ask. Then yeah, is also a DI consultant with the state of Minnesota revenue. You can also connect with her on LinkedIn. She has network connections, so she probably wouldn't be back anytime soon. Maybe an outage. I'm not sure about that. I've not been able to reach her. But what I'm just trying to say is the questions goes beyond what we are talking about now. What plan of action as organizations, you in the leadership position, you that have that seat at the table, what plan of action do you have in place, and how often do you visit that plan of action? Okay, I have a question. I would throw this to any speaker. I will allow you to, since we, yeah, just said she had a connection issues again, and she's not sure what's going on. Yeah, you may want to check your camera. I can see you, but I cannot see your face. Okay, so this question is from Kara and sent to us from LinkedIn. Kara Grace says, whenever interacting with a person from a different culture than your own, how do you ensure that communication is effective? Michael, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can touch on this. One thing that I guess is different for everybody is their communication technique. And sometimes you have to try multiple techniques to figure out what's going to be effective. Some people, prefer face-to-face interaction. Others would rather you email them, talk on the phone, text, whatever it may be. But there are different, I guess, methods for trying to communicate with someone. And if you are doing it in a more face-to-face way, whether it be virtual or in person, one thing to remember too is your body language says a lot to that person. So just going in there, being open, making eye contact, and making eye contact.
Michael, I'm going to cut you out there. There is this feedback we're getting over from your side. I'm not sure where. Please go on. Please, I think you can go on now.
Yeah, anything happens, if it's connection, you just
Uh, you, Michael, you cutting out like there's a glitch. So what I'll do is I'll just throw this question to Chiquita and let her answer the question and see. Chiquita, can you?
Yeah, Mike, it sounds a little staticky, like when you talk. That's the issue I'm having. I would say when Black and brown people, we are taught to talk proper, aka talk white, to get interviews, to be even considered for opportunities. As a young child, when I was younger, growing up in the inner city of Detroit, I used to get made fun of because I talked white or I talked proper. And, a lot of my family and friends didn't understand, how I talked, even though I didn't think it was nothing. I just loved learning. I loved education. I loved reading. So what I obtained from school, I just applied it. And one of those things was just knowing how to learn how to communicate. And I have realized my interactions with, people from different cultures, specifically white people, are a little bit more positive than what maybe my partner, who is, a person who doesn't have a college degree or college under, like, have that college education, K through 12, however, can still communicate, still a very sweet person, but have a difficult time with communicating with white people or people from, like, specifically white people, because I can have a full conversation with the person from a different background. It's just when it comes down to interacting with white people, or like, or those communities, it seems that's where the frustration begins, because I say something, say for instance, my slang or my dialect may come out a little bit, and then a person, oh, what did you say, what did you mean, I don't get it. And like, are you saying that you don't get it because you're trying to be funny, or you're saying that because you really don't know? I have had instances where a person really didn't understand what I was saying, and they like, they broke that down to me, versus a person that was just trying to make fun of my accent or make fun of, the way I talk. So I would say it's really intentional for people to, if you're wanting to have a conversation with a person from a different background, just ask them. If you don't know if you don't know, ask them questions. I'd rather you ask me than judge me. I don't want to feel like the conversation that I had with you was impactful on my end, but just for me to find out, from other people that you were talking or judging me. So really making an initiative to try to understand what the person is saying if you don't understand. Most times it's language barrier. You can't understand because of the heavy accent or the heavy voice. However, you can still ask questions. I'm a Black American, but I lived with a Ghanaian family for 2 years. Don't know how to speak Tree, but I understand them. And when people come in that space that haven't been around a Ghanaian family or a Nigerian community, they get confused, they get intimidated. But I am willing to be like, ask them a question. If you ask them what they're saying or ask them what they meant, they'll let you know. So not being afraid to just take that initial additional step to say, hey, I'm not sure what you meant, but I'm not sure what you said or what you tried to say. Can you explain that a little bit more to me? Because if you're wanting to be intentional, you shouldn't rush the conversation. Make sure that you're not rushing a conversation with a person that's from a different culture, especially if you're wanting to understand them and meet them where they are. So that's my advice. Just really, ask a question, take that additional step to make sure that you are committing yourself to wanting to be intentional with the growth of this relationship or with this communication, and just understanding that the person is going to be happy to answer the question to make sure that you understand what they're trying to say or communicate to you, because they don't want you to be confused, because they already may know about that language barrier or that strong dialect that they may have. So just asking that question and not being afraid to be intentional, I guess I would say. Like, we don't bite, we're nice people, we smile, and that will go a long way in regards to improving that communication.
Thank you very much. Intentionality, very, very important. Communication itself is an intentional activity. You have to speak to be spoken to. You have to you have to write to receive. You have to give to receive. It's a give and take. It's not a one way thing. It goes both way, and that can only happen through intentionality. So advice for this question is for communication is you have to be intentional. If you do not understand, like what Michael and Chiquita had said, even if you do not understand the way they speak, or you do not understand certain use of words, because sometimes our use of words are different. My use of words is different. I sometimes I have to explain myself, like, oh, I meant this, and use it in wait. But one thing I personally have done to bridge that gap is to make sure that I use as simple as possible. Make sure that my choice of words are as simple as possible, so that this person I'm speaking with can understand without having to ask too many questions. So the same goes to the other counterpart, the other person asking, or the other person in the communication hand. You can also choose to ask questions if you do not understand. Trust me, black people or people of color, Asian, Latinos, people in general are very, very nice. People are not hostile, they only respond to being hostile because that is what they receive. People respond to what they receive. We have another question. Ye is still trying to figure out exactly what is going on. She's on, but her camera is just not on. So when she comes back, I will probably let her just stay without the camera on, and she can have an input in as much we can hear her. So we have another question that says, okay, thank you, Florence Idewol, for this wonderful section. Thank you for listening to us. Thank our speakers also for having this section with us. So his question is, mentioning DEIB in your mission and vision statement is one thing, of course. It's another to actually live out those values in practice. What do you consider as the main challenges? Okay, I will have to read this. What do you consider as the main challenges for organizations? What do you consider as the main challenges for organizations willing to make this actual transition? So now we have DEI, diversity in our mission, or organizations have this in their mission, they have it in their vision statement. For instance, we all have the EEO, Equal Employer Opportunity Act, that every organization have to post, like, oh, we're an equal employer, we're not gonna be discriminatory in base of age, racial, and it's quite long, we all know that. But now the question is, what is this organization put in place to actually make the transition from having this diversity statement to actually having this in practice? Let's start from Michael.
Okay. Hopefully y'all can hear me a little bit better now. But I think one of the biggest issues is, diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't passive. It is one thing to say, okay, yeah, we are all for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to put it in our mission, vision statements. Great. It looks great to the public because it's on the billboards. But it's got to be an intentional act all the way through. And one way to ensure that your actions follow your words is set goals with your diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, okay, if we have zero representation in our C-suite of anyone diverse, okay, by the end of next year, we need to have someone in this role, and it needs to be someone qualified in this role. We don't want to set someone up to fail, and then that way everyone sees and goes, oh, this is why we don't have anyone diverse here, because they just failed. You want someone qualified, set them up for success, but have goals which you can check yourself against. If you say at the beginning of the year, we want to ensure that X percentage of our incoming employees that we interview and or hire are diverse, from a diverse background, okay, check yourself on that. Are you reaching that goal actually, or is it just, words? There's got to be action that follows it, and you need to be transparent with the goals that you set. They need to be set at the top, cascaded down throughout the organization, then embedded in the culture. It's one thing to just have your company town hall meeting and say, hey, we're trying to be a diverse organization now, we're going to try our best, but then not have any sort of metric to work off of. Now, you do need to be careful. You don't want to set a quota of something and then have, people push back and say, oh, well, this person only got hired, only got promoted because they're diverse, not because they're qualified. But you want to make sure that those opportunities are there. Those people that are getting those jobs, getting those promotions are set up for success, and then that it's a transparent process through and through. Person X was put in this role because of all of their qualifications, not just because they're a person of color. And once you have those goals, you have those ways to measure your DEI initiatives against, it's a lot easier to keep moving forward. But when you just make them very broad, general, vague, and it's just, words on a page, it is very difficult to have that truly integrated throughout your company. And it has to be, again, cascaded down to each level. Each level of your organization needs to have some way concrete that they know they can affect those outcomes. And if they know the path to improving those outcomes, they're much more likely to take action, towards those better outcomes. And again, there needs to be some way to measure that, to check that, and it needs to be incorporated in the company's performance goals. Everyone cares about profits and losses and, just the money coming in, your cash flow, your revenue stream. Make DEI an initiative that you measure your company and your individual's performance against. And then that way, okay, if your bonus is tied to somehow, or however you're trying to push that DEI initiative, if your bonus is tied into that just as much as it is your baseline performance, people in your organization are going to care significantly more about that DEI, and it's going to become more embedded in that culture if it is something that, they care about, they know how to, enforce and act against.
Thank you very much, Michael. Because of our time, this is a 90-minute section, live series with Florence Ido on DEI Small Talks. I will just I'll give the opportunity to say maybe a few things in 2-3 minutes, and we can have a close for the day. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Florence, for allowing me to just maybe having some departing words here. I apologize, folks, for my inconsistent internet stability here. But as Michael have already rightly stated, and Cabana have mentioned in the chat here, D&I is in the DNA. It has to be embedded. And so I think that a lot of people, folks will forget that it's not a check in a box. Equity work. If everyone starts focusing and centering equity in everything that we do, all organizations and businesses, even profit or advantages, will increase. You'll see increase in engagement, in better retention rates, better work environment, employee experience, respect in workplace, all of that great things. And it's not a destination; it's a journey, right? So if there will be issues here, but in 4 or 5 years later, expect more issues to come about. It's not a one hit and we're done. So I think that when we start thinking about equity as those actionable items for us to get to equality, which is equality for everyone. At the end of the day, that's all what we all want. And we all have different needs, different accommodation, and different things that we need as individuals, as diverse individuals, to bring us to our best at work and our authentic selves, and to be the best performers in the workplace. So I would say, if there's one thing that you all took from me today, centering and embracing equity in the work that you do will give you the outcome that you're looking for. So I'll turn it back over to you, Florence.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, I'll go over to Chiquita. What will be your pattern words? Let me take the word from here. What will be your pattern words to our listeners today?
My parting words would just be invest into yourself, invest into your professional development. If you don't feel confident to, make it, do the interview, and you want some help with to build your confidence, invest into a career consultant, invest into making sure that your resume is up to date. You have your cover letter ready. You have the things that makes you a strong applicant to be considered for the next to be considered for the initial interview, the second interview, to actually be considered for the job. And my parting words to employers, supervisors, and managers: be okay with partnering with BIPOC BIPOC organizations. Don't be afraid to, don't think that you need to do everything yourself, or if you're wanting to increase your diversity, but you're only investing into white majority consulting agencies, you're not going to get the results that you seek. So be okay with investing into your diversity, equity, and inclusion by partnering with a BIPOC or BIPOC consulting agency to help take your minority employee retention rate to the next level. Those are my final words.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Michael. What will be your thought? What will be your pattern words to our listeners today?
Yeah, so I guess I'd start with saying, thank you all for listening, and we appreciate the questions and having the opportunity to, speak to all of y'all today. I guess to close out, again, DE&I or DEIB is not passive. It's an active thing. It's a process, not a destination. And you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable and grow throughout that process. Whether that is, acknowledging your bias, your privilege, whether that is gaining a new skill set, whether that is changing just from an ally, which to me seems passive, to being an advocate and taking action and getting out there in a small or a large way. The best teams, statistically, with research and in practice, the best, most successful, most productive teams are diverse teams. So we need that diversity in the workplace, and we need those people who are diverse to feel comfortable in the workplace. So having those diverse teams makes you better, makes your organization better. So figure out a way to integrate DEI and B into your organization, because it's only going to bring positive benefits if done correctly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate. Thank you, our speakers, for having this section with us. Thank you very much. And this brings us to the end of the show. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for having this time with us. This is 90 Minutes with Florence Idowu on DEI Small Talks. This is sponsored by Bava Talent Solutions. Once again, Bava Talent Solution is an employment and a recruiting agency that's find diverse candidates for organizations and would look out for the qualified ones. It's not just about having those diverse candidates or diverse applicants, it's about having the qualified one. Thank you. I look forward to having you again next 2 weeks. That'll be every other Monday on the 29th, where we have the third series for this month, still and promoting diversity in promotions and transfer structure. See you then.